So welcome to January. It's a thin crowd today, apparently. There's only one person on so far, besides me and one other panelist. So we've kind of thinned out on both sides. But this is the first Crush the Chaos of the year. And we've got a few things planned. We'll see where we get to those. We may move some of them to next month for educational purposes. I'd like to get some knowledge into everyone this year on where AI is going, where automation is going, and how we are going to fit into that. There seems to be two sides of that story and two sides of it propagating through the media channels right now. So it's going to be interesting which story wins out over the others. But welcome. What I like to try to do on a day-to-day basis, I'm not always successful at, but I try to cut through all the hype. I try to implement real strategies that make common sense to everyone and don't really inflate anything and reduce the overwhelm ultimately. Because if we're less overwhelmed, we feel more comfortable. Time goes by a little bit slower or a little bit normalized, and we feel better. So, a little bit about me. My name is Philip Brown. I am a CEO, founder of Blue Pit Incorporated, which is a software consulting company that has been working in the automation and project management space for 15 years. And I also do automations and artificial intelligence with those automations for smaller companies through a partnered organization called Inertia Advisors. I'm still hoping that my Ghost CEO book comes out this month. We'll see. I only have 2 weeks to get that finalized. And then also, obviously, you're on Crush the Chaos. We have our panelist, David Rush. David, I'll let you say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good to be here. David Rush, Chief Operating Officer at Access Virtual Staffing. We do virtual staffing, virtual assistance primarily from the Philippines and Latin America, and find incredible quality people with high levels of talent and aptitude and help to support the growth and scale of small businesses. And it's been an exciting and rewarding journey thus far. We've been in business officially for the last year and a half, although our insurance business has been in this space for the last 10 years. And my prior background is in business coaching and communication coaching, executive leadership coaching. So I've been partnering a lot of my background and skill sets as we move forward with the staffing business, working with both individuals to put them in great situations where they can thrive, and then working with business owners and leaders to do some of what you said, Philip, which is how do we optimize? How do we get out of the weeds so that leaders can do what they were meant to do, which is lead and grow and build business while all the other things get handled and it's not a burden they have to bear. So I'm excited to be here and happy to share more.
We are definitely happy to have you here with us. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and just make it the two of us because we have a limited crowd. So, um, one of the questions that came up last week, David was excuse me. There's a kind of a feeling out there that all these AI agents are going to, replace the um, mundane, repetitive operations similar to what a lot of the VAs and EAs do for people. Um, when the VAs are in an offshore capacity. Like I think one of the individuals that I was listening to last week, he was like, "Well, what happens when these AI agents become smart enough to do the operations that these call centers or the VAs and the EAs do that are offshore in like the Philippines or India or other places. And kind of give me your thoughts on that and what, what you think about that, if you've heard anything on those lines.
Yeah, I think with any change, there's going to be some displacement, replacement, reallocation of resources and how things are done. So that's, you would be wrong to say that there's not going to be change as a result. I think in some ways, things that humans are doing are going to be replaced. And then it may be, well, can humans do other things, or can those same humans use the new technology to allow us to do even more, to allow them to do even more? And I heard from someone who put it this way, it's going to actually raise the aptitude of some of the, call it, lower performers, because they're going to be able to harness the technology in a way once they learn it that makes them even more valuable because they know the technology. So there's no answer. I think there's no clear answer because we're going to have to see how it evolves. But I was sharing the perspective that I think Elon Musk gave recently around robots, medicine, and operations, like the level of, let's say, doctor that the president gets, right? He said 3 to 4 years from now, there's going to be a robot that can operate at that aptitude, and it'll be mass produced such that the average US citizen will have some of the best healthcare and surgeons possible. He was talking about LASIK surgery. Would you want somebody who's really good but might have a shaky hand, or a real stable robot who has precision focus? It's an interesting thought. And so I think some things are going to change dramatically, and they already have been.
Yeah, I agree. I saw I think there was a podcast he was on with Peter Diamandis. It was one of the Moonshot podcasts or whatever, where he was talking about the healthcare and the surgeons, when his robots are going to be able to do surgery at such a precise and accurate level that, essentially, if he has those robots everywhere, then they'll be able to do surgery not just in the US at such a high level, but also all over. So it'll kind of change the trajectory of who gets good health care as opposed to who gets, not so good or so health care, right? Um, I think,
Another interesting perspective, and I love your thought on this too, is, as an example, a lot of the clients that we've worked with are, let's say, more service and trade oriented, but on the smaller scale, entrepreneur. Let's use let's say 20 employees and under. In that bracket, we said back in the day, maybe internet would cause disruption, websites would cause disruption, good CRMs would cause disruption. And the reality is, a lot of these businesses still haven't optimized a CRM platform or a email campaign platform, which could be highly valuable, right? And that technology has been around for years and years and years. So in some ways, I think about that. Certainly at the highest levels, this technology is going to disrupt. And then sometimes on the more granular levels, there'll be some time it's going to take one way or another to
yeah,
adopt all of this. And I've seen a lot of resistance to it. I've also seen people feel a little burned by it because there was a lot of promises early on. They tried to integrate, and I was like, I'm gonna keep doing business how I've been doing business, and when this is ready, I'll get more involved with it.
yeah, I think there was a article from MIT that came out and said about 95% of all of AI initiatives that were attempted in the last year failed. So, um, that's one of the things that That, as a software developer, software engineer, reminds me of when companies were trying to develop their own software before there was the cloud computing, SaaS and micro SaaS and all that stuff. Every company tried to have an in-house development team to develop software specific for their company. And at that point in time, the average spend or the average failure was at a $2 to $5 million a year spend rate because they would try something and it wouldn't work, but they would spend all the labor hours and all the time on doing that. I think that's where AI has become good for those types of things where you can now get back to creating software just for your own company and testing it out a little bit quicker. But to roll back a little bit for the jobs, like, I think you'll like this. So what I've the agreement that I have with my assistant Christine, who's on here, she knows we just talked about this over the past month, is my thought was, let's create an SOP of everything that you do, meaning, my assistant. And so she gave me that. I ran it through a custom GPT that I have that kind of organizes it into a nicely formatted SOP. And then I went back to ChatGPT through a few iterations and said, how many super hyper precise agents would I need to create to replicate and support what Christine does as a VA or an EA for me. It came up with 44 agents. So I would have to create 44 AI agents. And so one of the experiments that we're doing this year is I'm actually starting to create those 44 agents. And the way that that's going to occur is that the agents are going to get created and have their own tasks. But Christine is going to be the one that manages them and makes sure that they're doing the right tasks when they're supposed to be doing them. So, and to me, that's akin to, instead of somebody writing out a letter on paper and then handing it to, the CEO or their boss for approval, they're putting it in on a computer and emailing it to their boss for approval, and then it gets sent out, right? So there's those different levels to how we can utilize AI without thinking about the scary picture that everyone is trying to put out there that AI is going to take my job. And I think it's important to kind of remember that. And it's also important to remember that even though AI is going fast, companies move slow. Like, especially the big corporations that have all the regulations and all the different things that they keep track of, they're not going to throw in these AI agents and bots to do things immediately because they have to make sure that they're going to do things right, and they have to have a human manage them because the AI bots still can't think. They are logical and they think on paths, but not like a human would. A human can instantly see one thing and understand that these six other things have to apply to this one piece of information, whereas that may not be in the logical track of that AI agent.
Yeah, I was as you were saying that, I was reflecting on an automation that happened. And I was in New York City last week. I was in Rockefeller Center, and I was in a pinch for time, and I needed something to eat. And so a couple of the places had long lines, and then there was this one place was wide open. It said hot sandwiches. The hot sandwiches were on a rack. You could choose which hot sandwich you wanted that was already wrapped and packaged. You take that, and then there's no cashier. There's this platform with a thing on top of it. You take your sandwich, you put it into that platform. It automatically figures out what kind of sandwich you have. And then it says, here, scan your card. And a lady walked by and just kind of took a peek, smiled, waved, and that was the extent of the human interaction. And you see that in McDonald's, or you see that in all these places where humans are being replaced, displaced, and the volume of which are probably not going to be needed as much in those particular roles. It's questionable about where other roles show up. And so I think there's going to be some interesting shifts. And I don't think anybody has a crystal ball, but there's going to be a lot of disruption as this progresses, and it's progressing fast.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is to, for people who are fearful of it, to be informed and to stay informed because things are moving so quick that it's hard to really understand how quickly and what's changing unless you're getting informed through different channels, you know. Don't just listen to, I don't know, don't just listen to Fox News or CNN or ABC or NBC about it. You know, find people who are actually in it, going through it every day and understanding what's changing at the level at which you need to understand. Like maybe your job is, you know, I don't know. I had a Wendy's down the street. They just put in an automatic what is it in the drive-through. Instead of somebody going over the speaker and saying, "Give me your order," you're talking to an AI that takes your
Yes,
order
I
and
had
then
that
puts it on the
experience.
screen.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's like, okay, well, this is one, but they still have to have somebody inside to look at the order and fill it, right? So, and then there's a McDonald's in Colorado somewhere that's fully automated. Like you roll through and everything's done automatically. So, there's different levels, and the important piece is if you're fearful of it, take some time and figure out where you fit in. You know, it's we've gone through the same thing over the past 100 years. You know, you can look at probably more than 100 years. I mean, you can look at the Industrial Revolution. You can look at what's another good example? Electricity, right? Everything used to be lanterns. Now it's electricity. People thought that cars weren't going to be a thing and everyone was still going to do like horse and buggy. So we've evolved through things like this. We're just not used to it happening so fast. So it's hard for our minds to really adapt so quick because we're still, honestly, for like my generation and millennials, we're still getting used to cell phones, smartphones, social media, right? That's something that came out. We didn't have that growing up, and it came out as we got into adulthood. We have kids nowadays who are growing up with social media, with smartphones, with computers, laptops, iPads in their class. So they're used to it. It's like the normal thing for them, you know. So it's just this is the next thing that's coming out that's going to, I think it'll normalize before we get to the doomsday scenario of whatever the AI 2027 paper was talking about, or, you know, all the big tech companies, the whatever they call it, the six tech heads that are they're kind of ruling the world right now as they think. But it's one of those things that we can't really stop it because if we stop it, we run the risk of somebody else outpacing us and us being left behind. So it's kind of that what going back to what Elon Musk said is he's like, I resisted AI for years and years and tried to get them to slow down, and now I realize that I can't do that. So it's on, you know? He just is like, it's on, like light the fire, you know?
Yeah. I I saw well, I tune into X a lot, and so I've seen people posting and saying what used to take 2 years can now, 24 months can now take 24 days, if not 24 hours. And we were consulting with, as an example, a high-end Florida lobbying firm. And when the large language models were initially coming out, you could do deep research and produce a report, a consulting report that in the past you'd have to commission over an extensive period of time. Let's say it's a few months, extensive, right? But it would take a few months. It would be a few $100,000 investment. And then you would get the report, and then you'd have to reflect on the report. Now it's within hours. You can have that same report with all the different sources, depth of knowledge, information at your fingertips. And when my partner had shared it with the founder, he said this used to take months. It used to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you literally sent me an electronic copy within a day of us having this conversation. And so some of the things that are going on and the integrations that you can put into practice with very, very rapid pace. And some of the other posts that people put is, yeah, I built this app in the last 6 hours. I took a AI book writing course my friend was leading, like how to write your own book and become an Amazon bestseller. And now once you learn the technique of it, you can do that within hours and be a published Amazon bestseller if you know the approach, technique, and go through it. Like that's how fast things are happening. Now, I think there's also the depth of quality, the personal touch, and some people over time getting a little burnt out with AI and wanting human connection. And that's going to be an interesting cultural phenomenon as we go,
Right.
is how do we feel about being completely automated and AI centric? And in some ways, there's going to be a loss of that human pulse connectivity.
Yeah, I think people are going to have to understand how to get back out of their house and into social situations. They're prior to our 2021 to 2022 era, right? We people were out doing meetups and going to socials, and there were tons of conferences. And I think last year and this year they're spinning up more and more, like, as the young folks call it, IRL events in real life. And they're getting more interested in hanging out one-on-one or in a group and being able to be physically present with each other so that they can talk and communicate. And there's a certain energy to seeing people in real life in 3D, right? And not just in 2D on the screen. Micro expressions, just energy exchanges and things like that, without getting too, woo-woo about it. But there's definitely a difference when you're with a group together as opposed to being with a group on the screen. And one of my favorite things is to attend live events, and I'm glad that we're getting back to them. But I think you can look at it two ways, right? You can look at AI is going to like restrict you from being able to be it's going to take away the office environment, right? But maybe the good thing that comes out of that is that your AI that you manage, or your AI version, however you want to look at it, is doing the work while you can go and, take the walk in the park with a group of friends, or, go hang out at the beach, or go to the social event or whatnot. And you still have something, some component, a tool, if you will, working for you, doing the things that you need to get done, but freeing you up to do some things that you wouldn't normally have been able to do pre the AI era. So again, there's advantages and disadvantages to it, but I think if you really dig into the positive side of it, you can see where it can help you and kind of like iron proof yourself from being replaced. Because I don't think AI will ever replace somebody. It may do certain things better, but it's still a machine in the end. It's going to need some kind of maintenance, oversight, adjustment, configuration. You're going to have to program new pieces to it. So they'll, you know, there'll be plenty of things left for us to do, even though AI's, maybe writing our content and making our animated movies. But the luxuries will become the movies that aren't done with AI, the songs that aren't made with AI, the going out to the club and seeing a band live in person making real music that's not AI because they're on guitars and drums and everything like that. That it's gonna probably turn into the luxury instead of the norm, but it'll still be around. It's like today, people still want vinyl records, right? Some people still have record players and they play those and they love the sound of the record player and the needle and the static that comes with it. It's like a soothing thing, right? And then there's people that could care less and they just flip on Spotify and listen to the music, right? So,
It'll be interesting because if you think about human society and some of the forces that be that may want to control human society or control what people think and what they believe and how they operate, there's a lot of thought around that about how people are just going through an automated, call it simulation, because that's just how they've culturally been programmed. But I think there's going to be a premium or at least some kind of inflection upon at some point, maybe an awakening and saying, I want the real thing, like so to speak. I want to talk to a human. I don't want to even wonder whether or not even like at some point, David showing up on a Zoom, you won't
yeah,
know whether it's me or my AI avatar who I just sent to this conversation to have a conversation with Philip. Like that reality is
right.
probably not far away where I can do that and you wouldn't know the difference. And that's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be, at least for me, a pull for that authentic, real, live human connection at some point. And it'll be interesting to see how that progresses and plays out over time because, man, you go anywhere, people aren't talking to each other. They're on their screens and they're doing
Yeah, I know.
their communication is with the screen, and maybe it's with somebody else, or maybe it's just scrolling through a feed and flood of information that they've just numbed out to. And that's scary and
Yeah.
sad in some ways too.
It is because they've either they never have been introduced or they've forgotten what it's like to actually look up from the phone and interact with the people who are in front of you, right? So, you know,
And the dopamine quest or the dopamine hunt
wow.
is they keep getting payoffs from it.
Yeah.
If I'm on Twitter too long and then I'm in a meeting, I'm like, I want to check that thing. I want to see if somebody responded to this thing. And then it's in my head. And I know that when I do take the time to stay away from it and to be present, whatever that means for you, but even if it's just breathing and meditating and staying away from a screen for a while, it's like, oh, like life occurs differently. So
Yeah,
we can go in a
that's
lot of different directions, but it's going to be
it's
fascinating.
it's interesting you mentioned the be present thing because I instantly thought of like there's tons of people who just can't be by themselves with themselves, right? There has to be something there to grab that attention, whether it's a phone, a computer, a television, you know, even a pet or another person. We've lost that ability to just, I don't know, kind of reflect within ourselves and be alone. Like alone time with yourself is important when you know how to do it and you're not afraid of it. Some people are just afraid of being alone. So,
It couldn't be more apropos or timely because I'm part of a men's Christian group that we have a speaker every Wednesday morning. And the speaker today was talking about, for men in this case, our reluctance or fear of being alone. And in this context, it was alone in the silence with God But similar, whether you believe in God or what your orientation is, just being alone can be just like really challenging, just to be quiet, not being doing anything. And that's part of what he was saying. He's like, in those moments, sometimes you have to face the reality in your world or who you are or the insecurities that you might have because you don't have anything distracting or numbing you out. And then I was at a program this past Saturday, and one of the speakers talked about how most men don't have an actual best friend or good friend. They may have acquaintances, they may have people they go to an event with, but someone who they can actually confide in, share things that they're dealing with, and be willing to share those things are few and far between. And most of us are in some place of loneliness or we're alone, but we don't want to be alone because we've got other things that we distract ourselves with. So we're not alone with ourselves, we're alone with technology or whatever else it is, but we don't have a lot of those tight, trusted, warm relationships that we can rely on. And man, that's fascinating too. There's some interesting dynamics that are going on in this world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I have one friend that I've known for 40 years. So, and that's, he's the one that I can confide in everything. Like, we know each other's secrets, all the crazy stuff, right? But there's a lot of guys that don't have that. And there's beginning to be women that don't have that either, which, as a guy, that's kind of a crazy thing to think of for me because I always think of like the women are always the ones who are in the chatty groups and doing things with each other, and where the guys are more individual going out on their own unless they're in sports or some kind of activity like that. But it's beginning to be a commonality between anyone. Is just we don't really make that connection to have what you would consider a real friend. There's just a bunch of acquaintances. There's not the person that you can call up at any given time and they'll answer the phone and have a great conversation with you and talk about anything, and then you're done and over, right? There's just could be acquaintances where if you go out somewhere, you see them and you're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then you leave and you forget about them until next time you see them. It's not really um, that's not really a friendship because you're not really keeping contact and keeping communication. And I think there's a lot of distractions now. It seems, at least for me, it feels more difficult to keep up with more people, to have a larger group of friends because there's so many more distractions, right? Everybody's busy doing everything. It's not just, gone are the days where you're just busy working or busy doing family activities. You're now busy working 24/7 almost because you started bringing your work home, or you have a side hustle that you're doing, or you have, a ton of other things that you're trying to do on your own because you've been sucked into this world where you have to be doing something all the time, you know?
Yeah, that's what this speaker was speaking about this morning. He said, I was a pastor, I led jujitsu classes, I was building multiple businesses all at the same time. I was running, running, running. And like I thought, and what he realized was he was filling space and he was looking in some ways for that outside validation of like, because I'm busy, because I'm so active, I'm important, I'm doing the right things. And in the moment of it, as he was reflecting on his journey and what happened in his relationship with God, it was, why are you doing all this stuff? Is this really who you were designed to be? Or has this just been some kind of band-aid that's covering over what's really inside for you and what's really for you to do on this earth? And we medicate ourselves in all kinds of ways, whether it's with substances or screens or whatever else.
It's hard for people to really go deep and figure out why they're doing something. Like, what is the real what is the real reason you're running, 24/7 instead of taking time out for yourself? What is the real reason you force yourself to travel 364 days a year instead of, being home every weekend religiously, right? So there's always that piece where a lot of people today are reluctant to take a deep look at. Like you said, it is a spiritual experience, whatever your religion, right? You have to look inside and you have to figure out, like, why am I here? What do I want my purpose to be and why? You know? Because we're all searching for something. Is it communication with others? Do we need to, are we searching for that group of people that we just like click with? Are we searching for a deeper, you know, like helping others type of fulfillment? And I think people lose sight of that with technology, or they feel like technology is going to do it for them, which it won't.
Yeah.
So pretty deep stuff. I don't know where we got on this topic, but
Got to be careful. You never know what rabbit hole you're going to be
yeah,
roaming around in. Yeah.
it's like I feel like we just doom scrolled, but verbally there. But it's I think that, getting back to what's happening this year in AI and automation, especially, and I'll just keep it in the sphere of like, virtual assistants and the workplace is things are going to change really rapidly, even more so than they did last year. We just have to stay on top and make sure that we understand how we fit in and how we can stay relevant to what's happening. Because whether you own a business, you're working for a company, or you're supporting someone who owns a business, you have to understand how to stay relevant, even with the technologies that are coming out with AI and automation. And you know, not everybody thinks the same way that I do. So my first thought was like, okay, how do I get all this cool stuff started so that, you know, my EA can manage it for me? You know, that was my first thought. My first thought wasn't like, how can I do all this to replace my EA? Right? Because that's not what I want, because I still need someone to help me manage everything and to help make sure it's all working like a well-oiled machine and going properly. So I think that's where it's important is you don't want to replace the people that you already have. Yes, it may slow down hiring more people, but I think it will also cause a lot of business owners who use AI to hire more purposefully, um, and to really pay attention to the skills that they hire for. Because I can't tell you how many companies I've been involved with where people have been hired for a certain skill and then they get dropped into this all other duties bucket and then they get burnt out because they're not doing what they got hired for, because they're
Yeah.
doing 90% other stuff and 10% what they got hired for. And I think that's a lot of that I know for a fact is a big point in government. But in these big corporations, it's a big issue too. And I don't think the corporations have really caught on to that or know how to deal with that yet, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy going into these companies and kind of helping them see that and how to figure it out. It's not how many people do I have to let go this year. It's how do I get these people doing what they really enjoy doing so that we can increase the revenue of the company and get rid of the waste, right? There's a lot of time that's being wasted in between these things. I used to call it cubicle speak, right? I hated going into an office because half of my time would be people walking by my cubicle saying, "Hey, how's it going? How was your weekend? What did you do?" And I just wanted to do my work. But now that's kind of it's kind of twisted into a different kind of meaning. So,
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of important points there. One, the last one for me, even in a noisy office space, I realized how sensitive I am to sound and
mm,
distraction. And if I can even hear a subtle conversation in the background, like I tune into it because I'm hypersensitive on the audio side. And so when I put on headphones, it was a game changer for my focus, right? So I think in some ways, as humans, and one of the things I'm passionate about is how do we be most optimal in our human capacity to perform, to focus, to know what is our optimal time of day that we do focused work. Like for me, it's early in the morning when I'm awake, it's quiet, no one else is around. I can just dial in and get things done at a feverish pace and a focused pace and all of this stuff. But I think similar to what you were saying around organizations and leaders and thinking about our team, how do we put our people in the spots where they can best thrive and succeed and be in what you might call their zone of genius? Because, yeah, if you take even on a simple level, someone who's a virtual assistant and they were hired for this role and now you're asking them to learn digital media and it's just not their thing. They're getting stressed out, they're getting burnt out, as you said. And now who could have been someone who's highly impactful in, let's say it's admin or process, and you've asked them to do this thing and now they're miserable, and they decide not only do they not want to do this, they don't want to do this other thing you used to ask them to do because they're not happy in the organization and they're going to go elsewhere. I think that's so important in what I've experienced as a employee myself over time or managing other people over time is making sure that people are in the right place. And if they're not, how do we make adjustments or at least understand that they're not? And we're going to figure out how to either get them there or get them where they should be. But if you're not doing that, you run the risk of being blind to some of the things that'll derail your people and ultimately derail your business.
yeah, I agree with that. And the craziest thing is some leaders will say, well, how do I figure that out? The answer is super simple. You communicate with your employees, right? You ask them, you have honest conversations with the virtual assistants or whoever you employ about what's happening in their work life, right? Are they and this is also on the leader to be that type of leader where his or her employees feel open to that communication, right? They have to know that you have an open door policy that you will take any kind of constructive feedback about the business or about how things are going, about how they feel, and do what's right with it and not just, you know, um, take it as a criticism on you personally and go the disgruntled way of that. But it's a lot of the leaders just need to have conversations, true conversations, not one-sided conversations. I've talked to enough leaders where the weekly one-on-one was them talking about themselves the whole time and never about you, right? So if you're gonna have a weekly one-on-one or if you're gonna like have a, a check-in with your employees, make sure that it's about them and not about you as a leader, right? Because this is this is how you propagate a culture where people want to stay with your organization because they understand that you really listen to what they're having feelings about and what their concerns are, right? And
Yeah. Well,
it shows up really well in companies that do that, you know?
it's funny you say that too, because I know we're not necessarily getting into the educational side of things today, but one of the things I was going to share if we did was what I call the conversational model. And a lot of my past career for a portion of time was me personally learning how to communicate more effectively and confidently, and how to have conversations with people that, whether it was sales or just basic relational things, and learning some of those approaches, but then also consulting with executives and teaching them some of these arts after I had learned them. And once you are aware of some of them and you're in a conversation or you're watching a conversation, because a lot of times I would watch people have conversations and how quick it is and automatic that it becomes about us rather than listening to the other person in the conversation. And you tell me you went to Hawaii, and I tell you about the time that I went to Hawaii. I don't say,
Right.
well, what island did you go to? How was
Right.
your time there? What was your favorite takeaway? What was your favorite moment? Like, it rarely is it the person asking additional questions. And if it is, it's like one question, and then it's time for me to tell my story. And so we don't have to get into this, but I actually created an acronym out of my last name, but it was how to have a conversation, relate, which is like build rapport with somebody, understand, which is go a little bit deeper, but it's about the other person. So the first two steps of any conversation is about the other person, which you just said earlier. And then S is share, like then share something that's relevant to what you heard. And the H is harness, like how do we take what we've talked about and move forward in some capacity. And if it's a business conversation, I heard what's important to you. I shared where I might be able to add some value, and then we figure out if we have a path forward together. But how quickly we as humans make it about us when everybody else wants it to be about them. And it sometimes it's basics of communication, but we don't learn it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't have an acronym for mine, but it's just simply be curious. And then, when you want to provide feedback, ask because they may not want feedback, right? So, you know, it's more from I guess from coaching, training and stuff like that. It's like, it's more like ask permission to provide the feedback than rather just blurt it out.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all have those friends that just give us advice, right? So it's definitely, it's a communication thing. If you know how to communicate, then I think everyone will be fine. But I don't see any additional people coming on here, David. I don't want to keep us forever, or I don't know that we need to go the whole 90 minutes. So if you're okay with wrapping up for the hour, then we can do that and kind of give
Yeah,
ourselves
works.
about 30 minutes back. And I would like to see if, when I get the educational format more lined up and more people joining, if you'd like to come back and actually, um, do your whole talk on, the educational piece.
Yeah, happy to. Happy to. Let me
Awesome.
keep me posted.
Yeah, this is, I think this is the sixth Crush the Chaos, if I'm counting right, maybe the seventh. So we're still in the kind of getting traction stage. So
And I don't know
soon.
if Albert's here. And Albert, I don't know if you have
Yeah.
any questions or comments or thoughts. If anything's come up for you, you're more than well, Philip. I didn't mean to invite Albert in, but I
No,
think
that's fine.
it's
I'm
okay.
curious about what the PMC stands for. So,
Yeah.
Albert, are you enjoying the
Yeah,
conversation?
yeah. Hello.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah. Well, it was a very exciting discussion between the two of you. I liked it. The way it turns out from AI to all these other interesting developments, it was quite exciting. Well, PMC is a Pickford Management Consultant, so we're a consulting company. operating mostly in Africa and the Caribbean. But I'm based in California, San Francisco to be specific.
Okay, great.
Very nice.
Well, I definitely, thank you for joining and hanging out for the conversation, Albert. We definitely appreciate you being on, and um, I think if you want to catch up with either one of us, both myself and David, we're both on LinkedIn, and I'll share my slides here one more time and pop onto that section where we'll have a nice view in the video of what our LinkedIn's are. So anyone who wants to reach out and contact us directly and um, kind of continue the conversation, you're more than welcome.
Yeah,
And
thank you very much. I will definitely do that.
awesome. And with that, thank you for attending. David, thanks for coming on and having that conversation with me for an hour. I enjoyed it. And until next month. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Crush the chaos.
Yes.
Thank you.